Default 66 says, Mark, since Ineos came in, we've spent 620 million. That's the second most in world football behind Chelsea. What's a good reason we can't finish fifth? I'll give you a good reason. I'll give you a very good reason. I don't know whether they have spent 620 million pounds, because I don't know how they've managed to do that, considering we spent less than 200 million pounds this summer, and there's no way that Ten Hag got 420. So I don't think you're quite right there. I'd say it's more $500 million. But I will answer the question anyway. Let's pretend it is 620 million. Why are we not able to finish in the top 5? Because when Ruben Amorim took the job last November, and we spoke about aspirations and what was needed, I specifically remember doing a show saying, how much money do you think this squad in its current form needs spending on it for Man United to be a top club in England? And the vast majority said closer to $1 billion than $500 million. So I would say to you, Default 66, I would delete any amount of that money that was spent on Ten Hag. I would total up what's been spent on Amorim, and I think it's around 200 million. And I would say that's not even half the minimum you all said needed in November last year. I think for Man United to be a top 4 club from what Amorim took over, definitely agree between $500 million and $1 billion. He's had 200 million. So when people, and the media do this, I don't blame Default 66, the media do this. They do say, Amorim's had 200 million, why can't he get in the top 5? United fans should be saying, because when he got the job, he's a 3-4-3 coach with a crap team that can't even play 4-3-3. 200 million pounds was never going to be enough. Double it. In fact, double it and double it again. Then we'll talk. And that, what annoys me about when people say he's had 200 million pounds, it's like that is relevant. Like that, anybody with a brain would say United need $500 million to $1 billion on spending on them. But as soon as a manager gets 200 million, it's suddenly enough. It's like, listen to what you said in the first place. Take a loan, spend $1 billion, forget Peruls, says Aaron G. Thank you, Marlo. One Inch Wonder says, given the current state of the club, culture at our club, if Amorim gets us into any European competition next year via the league, it's a huge achievement, in my opinion. I really don't want to be in the bloody Conference League, though. I really don't want to be in the Conference League at all. I think I might have shouted her out, but Gems has gifted 5 memberships. What a legend. Thank you, Gems, one of our moderators there. Stephen Barnum says, I just wish that the manager would play the best players we have in their best positions. If we did, we'd back him. Look, I think what you're alluding to there is the midfield. Look, nobody's perfect, and God, no Man United manager's been perfect since Sir Alex. We know that. I think there's so much to like about Amorim, but he has got little intricacies that frustrate. I said on the weekend, I'm not going to lie, I'm starting to run out of patience with him. That doesn't mean I'm close to being Amorim out, but he does frustrate me. You know, it's like, you know, I'm sure we can all think of people that we know and like and love who do things that frustrate us. And Amorim does frustrate me, but I do agree with you that, you know, he would have a lot more patience if he didn't play Bruno in the midfield and played him as a number 10. Because if he played Mainu and Agate and they weren't very good, the fan base would go, that's because they didn't buy him a midfielder. Because we all know he wanted a midfielder. But because he puts Bruno in there, you can't say, well, that's because they didn't buy him a midfielder. Because if they did buy him a midfielder, he'd still play Bruno with them. And I think he's killing his own excuse there. Because we all know that games are won and lost in the midfield. But he puts Bruno in the midfield, so you can't be sympathetic about not getting a midfielder. God, I want to be. You know, I try every show. I'll say they didn't buy him a midfielder. I've probably said it about 4 times in the last hour. But it is hard to sympathise with Amorim not getting a midfielder, even though he needs one, because he'd still play Bruno with them, and that's the problem. I can't be sympathetic about the midfield when he's not playing a midfield that, you know, exposes the problem. What I mean by that is, if he picks his best midfield and the problem's exposed, you go, it's because they didn't buy him a midfielder. But he's not playing the best midfield. He's putting Bruno in there and sometimes Casemiro in there. And when you've got Ugarte and Mainu on the bench, you don't start thinking about buying a midfielder. You start thinking about Mainu and Ugarte. If you played Mainu and Ugarte and they weren't good enough, I wouldn't be going, well, Bruno and Casemiro should be playing. I'd be going, they should have bought him a midfielder.